Are in the middle of a series we're calling Heavenly Peace. That seemed appropriate. And we've really been leaning into this whole idea of margin and rest and what does God say about that and why is that important. Next week we're going to turn the corner a little bit and really especially focusing on the idea of peace. And obviously there's connection there. But a couple weeks ago I shared that psychologists are calling this new sort of thing. They have a phrase for it. It's called hurry sickness. If you were here a couple weeks ago, you remember that? Hurry sickness. And you're like, well, what is hurry sickness? Hurry sickness is a behavioral pattern characterized by continual rushing, continual anxiousness. And you're like, well, how do I know if I have it? When you get to an intersection and you're driving down the road and, it's safe, there's nobody in front of you, and then the light turns yellow, what do you do in that moment if you're approaching the intersection? Some people hit the brakes, and then other people are like Jesus, and they hit the gas, and they go right on through there. And no, I'm kidding. But if you step on the gas, if you're that kind of person, weaving in and out of traffic, trying to find the shortest lane, that sort of thing, constantly looking at your watch and let's get going here. And then you might have hurry sickness. Probably most of us have hurry sickness. It's just the kind of person who hates any kind of delay, doesn't like to wait, wants things done right away, is chronically short on time because they typically have way more to do than they have time to do it. And this whole phrase, hurry sickness, was coined by a cardiologist after he noticed that many of his at-risk patients had this acute sense of time urgency. And so he developed this phrase, this concept, coined that phrase, hurry sickness. This was in the 1950s. So do you think things have sped up since then or slowed down? Probably sped up, right? And unfortunately, in many ways, and there's some good things to speed, and I mean, who doesn't like high-speed Wi-Fi and those kinds of things? But it's also robbing us of certain things as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today and how we combat that. Once upon a time, if you're younger, you may not even realize this, but in the good old US of A here, there were occasions where a person could describe themselves as bored. Remember that word, bored? And I do as a kid because there's just nothing to do and nowhere to go and nothing to do on outside, inside, nothing on TV. And I vividly remember, literally right now, I can remember sitting kind of on our couch overlooking a front window, looking outside and just being bored stiff. And the reason is because my friends, my neighborhood buddies, had the audacity to be gone, like on vacation or out with their parents or whatever. And I'm just so bored, right? I'd complain to my parents, there's nothing to do. And they would say, well, why don't you read a book or clean your room or play in the street, play in traffic or something like that. And so I quickly learned to stop asking or telling them that I was bored, right? But that's just kind of the world we lived in. In fact, just a few years ago, they developed this thing called mobile ordering at some coffee shops. But before mobile ordering, if you can remember all the way back, 4 years, before then, you had to order, wait in line, sometimes as much as 7-8 minutes. And you couldn't just walk into the coffee shop and grab your stuff and go. You had to wait in line and order and that sort of thing. And how many of you remember long plane flights before there was televisions everywhere and that sort of thing? Anybody remember that? Right? And you're just like, what do I do? And you remember the Sky Mall magazine? I spent so much time in the Sky Mall magazine. There was just so many cool things in there, oh, this will change my life. And so if you don't know that, that's really, you're missing out on Americana. But anyway, and you're so bored. Well, now we're not bored. We always have something to look at. I always have something to scroll through. I always have something to watch or enjoy. The only time we're bored is if the Wi-Fi goes down, right? Then it's oh man, we're so bored. And some of you remember waiting in line at the bank, waiting in line at the grocery store, in traffic, doctor's office. You're well, we still do those things. Yes, but we do it differently because when we're waiting, we pull out this, right? And then we have something to watch, something to listen to, something to scroll, a feed to look look at or whatever, right? And so we're constantly being entertained. We have our selection of our preferred playlist of music, podcasts, checking sports scores, checking, I don't know, whatever the economy's doing, the stock market, getting lost in those short videos, those reel videos, one after, oh, look what that cat does. Look at that chicken, it's just this endless stream, right? And one of the things we just do not permit ourselves to do anymore is to be bored, right? But has there been a cost to that, right? Has there been a cost to this idea of lacking boredom, as it were? And it's interesting because some people think this is the most restless a generation has ever been, especially younger people, just very fidgety, very restless. Remember the fidget spinners? Yeah, that was good in classrooms and stuff like that. You guys don't remember what I'm talking about? These little kids really spin the thing? Okay. Anyway, but depression's up, anxiety's up, all these terrible things are up, and there's almost this war being waged on our heart, war being waged on our souls. And when I say soul, I mean like our inner self. And this lack of boredom, if you think about it, it's when we're bored, oftentimes we're creative, we're contemplative, we dream, we wonder, we process, we might pray, we might notice others around us, get into a conversation we didn't expect, with somebody. It might allow us to be a little introspective and, ask ourselves questions about, life and relationships, all those kinds of things. And now it seems like all those little moments of boredom are gone, right? In Philip Zimbardo's research on this, the demise of guys, he calls it, he concluded that the average guy today who plays video games spends 10,000 hours playing video games by the age of 21. And some of you are like, well, 10,000's a big number, but 21, I mean, that's, you didn't say like in a month or something like that, which would be impossible. But anyway, and let me just break this down for you really quickly, okay? Because I like doing the math thing or whatever. But let's just pretend that you sleep 8 hours a night. And so you're up 16 hours during the day. But let's say 2 of those hours are just like taking a shower, brushing your teeth, eating meals, just the stuff you have to kind of do each day. But nothing else, like not going to school, not going to work, not watching in a movie or anything, like nothing else. So let's just say you have 14 hours left a day. Well, 14 hours over the course of a year would equal just over 5,000 hours. So 2 years of doing nothing but playing video games by the age of 21 on average. Now, this is, by the way, during this message, there'll be little nuggets like that. And some of you will be like, oh man, feel all, guilty and whatever, and you caught me and whatever. That's not what this is about, okay? This is not a getcha. This is just to listen and lean in a little bit and wonder, are we missing something? Because I'm telling you, life goes by quickly, and the truth is, with 10,000 hours, you could master a musical instrument, right? You could get your bachelor's degree and your master's degree with 10,000 hours. Right? You could memorize, people say you could memorize the entire New Testament with 10,000 hours. Right? Or you could finish Call of Duty, the video game. And hey, I'm sure the Lord loves Call of Duty. I don't know anything about it. But anyway, it's not about that. It's just about assessing, what are we trading our time for? And are we missing something and not having those spaces of kind of quietness or maybe we'd call boredom? This one guy, Ronald Rolheiser, said this: we are distracting ourselves into spiritual oblivion. And I've shared this illustration before, but you can cross the country in many different ways. You can hop on a jet airplane, you can drive in a car, you can get on a train, you can ride a horse, ride a bike, you can walk across the United States. And the principle is this: the faster you go, though, the less you see. The faster you go, the less you see. See, busyness and hurry and speed will keep you from seeing those around you, including those closest to you. including even your own spouse or children or your best friends or that sort of thing. It'll prevent you from connecting with others, from caring with others. Speed is an enemy. Busyness is an enemy to compassion, right? There's all these things. It's an enemy of being present with those who are, who are around us, as well as being present with God and attentive to our own souls. But there's something else too. It robs us of something even more than that. The average American reads about 200 to 400 words in a minute. So let's say you read for 417 hours, okay? Which is just over an hour a day, 365 days a year, right? 417 hours, and I'm just picking that up because it would allow us, on average, to read 200 books in a single year. 200 books in a single year. You're like, well, 417 hours, that sounds like a lot. And it is, until you realize that the average American spends 815 hours on social media every single year. So 417 did sound like a lot until I put that number up, right? And more than 1,000 hours in a given year watching television or a movie or something on a screen. Right now, add those up. And you're talking, like, that's just a lot. Again, this isn't to make anybody feel guilty or shameful or anything like that, but it's just to, let's just assess the way we do life. Scholar and Professor Charles Chu said this: we have all the time we need. The scary part, and this is the convicting part, because, look, I am as guilty as anybody in the room, just so you know. And Joy can attest to that. And I would encourage you not to ask Joy about my habits. But the scary part, he says, is the part we all ignore, is that we are too addicted, too weak, and too distracted to do what we all know is important. And man, time waits for no one. It just keeps passing, and you cannot really truly redeem the time. You don't get it back, in other words. And the sheer pace of our society and our culture and the world in which we live, this is why we're leaning into this big time, it's not conducive to the Christian life. It doesn't live in harmony with the Christian life. Think about music. There's rests in music, are there not? There's pauses. There's a rhythm to music. And if there's just notes the whole time, it wouldn't sound good, it wouldn't sound pretty. That's a lot like life. Some people's life is it's full but noisy instead of beautiful, okay? And so we want to address this kind of idea, because I believe that the way of Jesus, in following him, we'll discover some ways to address this epidemic of hurry and busyness. It's counterintuitive. It's not what we would think necessarily. It's countercultural for sure. And what I would also say is this: you might have to give up some what appears to be success in the world's eyes to gain the experience, the enjoyment of what Jesus would call true life in God's eyes, okay? So, what does it look at like? And I'll just refer to this passage we looked at last week in Matthew chapter 11, very famous passage. And in it, Jesus invites those of us who are tired and burdened, worn out, and that sort of thing. And he gives us an invitation. Let me just read it through again to remind us. It says this: "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened." Now all of our ears perk up. Oh, that's me. He's talking to me. "And I will give you" what? Rest. He says, "Take my yoke, my way of doing life, my teachings upon you, and learn from me. Let me teach you. For this is the kind of God I am. I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest. If you're yoked to me, you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." So you're like, okay, I'm tired and weary and exhausted and burdened and that sort of thing, and I want rest for my soul, my inner self. Where do I find it? And Jesus gives us that invitation in those first three words. This is where we find it with him. Come to what? Me. In fact, he could say, this is the only place you will find rest for your soul. It's not like one of the options. And I know we are very suspicious about this, because this is why we don't do it. We're wondering, is this actually good? Is this actually better? And I remind us of this pretty regularly here if you're new. Let me just explain it this way, that every time God commands his people to do something or to not do something, it's for our good and our flourishing and his glory. Every single time. There is literally no arbitrary command. It just feels that way, or we think it is to us. But what we need to do is trust that God actually is the creator of life. He knows how we ought to live life. He gives us guidelines, instruction, and plenty of freedom, by the way. But this is the way in which you are to carry yourself through life. How do I break free from this burden and the exhaustion and being tired? Jesus says, you've got to come to me. You got to get away with me. You got to listen to me, sit at my feet. And if you do, you'll be renewed and revitalized and refreshed, and you will find rest for your soul. But the only way is you got to go to Jesus. You got to learn from Jesus. You've got to walk with Jesus. You got to practice the way of Jesus. He doesn't just say, believe in me or pray in my name or whatever. He's really saying here this. He's saying, be my apprentice. You know, as the master, he's saying, be my apprentice, be my student. Watch me, listen to me, learn from me, follow me, model your life after the way in which I live. So author John Mark Comer, who wrote the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, from which I'm getting a number of these statistics and different things like that, says this: if you want to experience the life of Jesus, you have to adopt the lifestyle of Jesus. Now, this seems so obvious, right? But I think we miss it. We want the life, but we don't always want the lifestyle. But the two have to go together. So sometimes, I don't know, I'm walking my dog or driving down the road or whatever, and I see some dude looks fit as a fiddle, whatever that means, and just looks strong and is running down the road, working out, kind of like getting his run in or whatever for the day, and he's almost prancing. It's almost like just effortless, whereas I'm slogging and trudging. He's just dancing, he's galloping almost, as it were, like, the Secretariat or something like that. And sometimes in the summer, maybe it's like a sleeveless shirt, or shirt off or whatever. And I'm like, okay, that's enough. But still, it's like, man, I wish I could have that kind of energy, right? That kind of, because I would be just running for 50 meters or yards or what, and I'm out of breath, kind of thing. Like, I wish my heart was that strong. I wish I looked like that, I wish my clothes fit like that, all these kinds of things, right? I want that lifestyle, in other words, but then I do a cost benefit analysis, and maybe even I start to work out like January 1st, you set some goals, and then I'm usually done by January 3rd. But anyway, so I do that. So the truth is, as great as they look and as strong as they are, and boy, I want to be like that, at the end of the day, it's just, to me, it's not worth the pain, right? It's just not worth, because it is painful. So I want the life, but I don't want the lifestyle required for it. And really listen to this. Life doesn't work like that. And even looking more like Jesus, it doesn't work like that. Friends, there is pain, discipline, difficulty involved. But if you talk to somebody who works out all the time, they will say it's one of their favorite parts of their day. But they do it all the time, right? They've trained themselves into such. I can't even imagine this, by the way. I'm like, well, maybe like when I was 18 or something. But like as a grandpa, I can't even imagine it, right? But they just no, they enjoy it. It's the highlight of their day or whatever. Let me just give you an example here, because this happened like a couple of weeks ago. This came out. The world record for push-ups by a woman in 1 hour was just recently set. In 1 hour, this woman did 1,575 push-ups. Okay? Is that incredible? That's amazing to me, right? This just happened like 10 weeks ago or something like that. And the name of this world record holder for women for push-ups, her name is Donna Jean Wild, I think we have a picture. There she is. And she, get this, is 59 years old. She has 12 grandchildren. Now, this is the part you should feel guilty, okay? This is the part of the message. It's the only part of the message. You should feel shame and guilt, but the rest, don't worry about it. This part, yes, okay? And I'm like, 1,575 push-ups in an hour? Are you kidding me? Granny here? 12 grandkids? Like, part of me is like, dude, you need to do something else other than work out. You know, like, come on, there's more to life. But still, it's impressive, it's incredible, it's unbelievable. Like, over the course of setting the record, her shoulder came out of socket, dislocated, and she popped it back in. And kept going, whew, whew. Every like 2 seconds, another, right? And it's crazy. So if you're a healthy person, it's not that you can't, okay, you can't do 1,500, but it's not that you can't do, let's say, 50 push-ups. It might be just that you can't do it yet, okay? You can't do it yet. And what's required? What enables you to do that? A lot of willpower? No. Training. Discipline. Blood, sweat, tears, right? Day after day. Some pain involved. Disciplined practice enables you to do in the future what you cannot currently do in the present. Okay? This principle of life works for playing an instrument, works for, all kinds of things in life, right? So I just want to throw this piece of the message in here. The easy life, friends, is a myth. No matter what you do with your life, because life has a way of catching up to us. And even if we try to live an easy life, if we do that too long, it will get really hard really fast. So this whole idea of an easy life is hard, full stop. There's no escaping the pain. So why don't we intentionally direct some of the discipline in doing what Jesus says would be good for us, is the concept here, all right? Because life is a series of choices. We can't do it all. We have limited, finite time, right? It's a series of choices. You've heard this, cliche, every yes is 1,000 what? No's, right? You say yes to something, saying no to 1,000 other things. But the habits we develop largely shape the kind of people we become. This is maybe silly, I say it all the time, you can't cram character. You cannot cram character. I crammed a lot of tests growing up. You cannot cram character. It never works that way. So what I'm saying is, I just need a pinch of spirituality and come to church once every 3 months, and I just need somebody, will somebody pray for me? I'm going through a hard time. It's like, you cannot cram the spiritual strength and stamina required to live a life that's good and that honors God. We got to learn to imitate Jesus. All right, so 3 practices I want to share with you today, okay? These are going to require some discipline, and yes, your pastor, Pastor Joel's terrible at them. Okay, good. I'm glad we got that out of the way. Please, again, don't talk to my wife about any of these things. All right, so number 1, the practice of solitude and silence. Solitude and silence. In his book, The Screwtape Letters, C.S. Lewis writes this about the head demon. His name is Screwtape. It says this: "We will make the whole universe a noise in the end." That sounds like today. The whole universe it's just everything's loud. Everything's fast. And when the universe is a noise, we become deaf to God. It literally drowns out the nudging of God. And there are external noises, the obvious things, traffic, music, podcasts, notifications, ding, 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 all these things, right? But then there's the internal noise. That part that we have a harder time shutting off, the internal chatter, the running commentary that never seems to shut off. And like a hoarder, we just can't let things go. and we keep thinking about this conversation, and we keep thinking about how can I get back at that person, and there's something to be afraid about, and something to worry about, and there's something to obsess over, and then there's daydreaming, and there's fantasizing. You know what we tend to do in terms of fantasize? We fantasize some idealized perfect life. You know? The perfect person in our lives, the perfect friends, the perfect church, the perfect whatever, car, house, perfect, all the things are just like idealized, and I'm not going to rest until these things are perfect. Then you will never rest. That internal noise needs to settle down. Jesus is baptized. Remember this? And the first thing he does after he's baptized, does anybody know what he does? He goes somewhere. He goes into the wilderness for 40 days. Now remember, I had a project in seminary, and it was like learning spiritual disciplines and that sort of thing. And like one of the projects was spend a whole day in like alone. Just like a pad of paper and a pencil or pen and jot down some thoughts or whatever, but spend it just contemplating, reflecting, praying, noticing creation. So I remember going to this park in the woods and whatever, and I thought, you know what, this will be a good restful time. You know what I found after like 15 minutes? I was so bored. And it was like all the noise, I had such a hard time shutting it off. Now, we can use all kinds of excuses. Well, my personality or ADHD, whatever, all the stuff. It's like at the end of the day, what I'm saying is, it was a discipline. It was difficult to just let the chaos settle so I could see clearly, right? See, Jesus goes into the wilderness for 40 days, and you know who's there to meet him? Satan. The devil's there. And the devil tempts Jesus, does he not? This is in one of the places, Matthew 4. And so sometimes people say things like this. Sometimes people will say, isn't that just like Satan to attack us when we're at our weakest? You know, Jesus is out in the wilderness. Hasn't eaten anything, and he's at his weakness. And if that's our response, I think we're missing the point. Jesus didn't go into the wilderness alone in solitude and silence to be weaker. He went to be stronger, don't you see? And in finding strength with his Father, he was able to withstand the temptations of the enemy. Are you guys with me on this? This is super important. It does not happen any other way. Why do I keep falling into this temptation, this addiction, this thing? Well, have you practiced these things? Are you practicing these things that will enable you? So listen to what Jesus often practices. Mark 1:35 says, very early in the morning, really early, while it was still dark. Can you imagine that? So this is a priority. It's very intentional. It's something he's going to do. It's his choice, you know. While it was still dark, Jesus, here's what he did. He got up. He left. He left the house, and he went off to where? A solitary place. He did not bring his phone with him. And you know what he did there? He spent time listening to the Father and speaking to his Father. He prayed, right? He often withdrew. To a child, love is spelled, this is cliche, maybe you've heard this. To a child, love is spelled T-I-M-E. But I think that principle applies to every relationship. We will not foster healthy relationships in our lives without spending time with people. And here's the thing, we're limited in our times, therefore we are limited in the depth of our relationships. And some people, they have like 5,000 Facebook followers, but 0 friends. Because they don't have time for just, one or two, couple close friends or whatever. I mean, imagine a husband and a wife, like they rarely spend time together, Imagine Joy comes up to me and, hey, hon, can we talk? And I'm like, let me check my calendar. Yeah, I've got 10 minutes on the 10th. That's on Tuesday. I'll work you in. Like that is, I'm being facetious or exaggerating. I'm embellishing, but kind of not, because a lot of people operate that way and they expect a good relationship. The same is true with God. Jesus gets away, he leaves, he goes to what kind of place? A solitary place. Now, this is him being alone with the Father, but not lonely. Notice the difference. See, solitude is nourishing, isolation is depleting. Richard Foster writes this: loneliness is inner emptiness, solitude is inner fulfillment. So in getting away, we spend time with our God in silence. The late theologian and writer Henry Nouwen, he wrote this: without solitude, it is virtually impossible to live a spiritual life. He means like a godly life. We do not take their spiritual life seriously, the spiritual life seriously, if we do not set aside time to be with God and listen to him. It is absolutely critical. Okay? So let's look at the next verse. So very early, Jesus gets up, solitary place. Then it says this, verse 36. I love this. Simon, that's Peter, and his buddies, his companions, went to look for him. Isn't this just real life? I finally got some peace and quiet. I finally got away. And when they found Jesus, they exclaimed, everyone's looking for you, right? So if you are a mom to young children, you know exactly what this is like. You just need like 3 minutes. So you go into the only place where you can find solitude, the bathroom, right? You don't even need to use a bathroom. You just go into the bathroom. You trick your kids. You're lying to them. It's okay. It's for a good purpose, your sanity. And so you go in there, and 3 minutes later, or you hear, Mommy, right? And moms, you know what I'm talking about, right? There's no place to run or whatever. So you're like, okay, Joel, what's your advice? To hang on for dear life until that season passes. That's my advice to you. It's just hard, right? But I love how real this is. Jesus is busy. He's in high demand. He's wanted. He's needed. But he has to make time to get away. In fact, he does this frequently. In Luke 5, we read about him often withdrawing to be with the Lord. The 6th century Syrian monk said this: the friend of silence draws near to God. I love that. The friend. What if silence became a friend instead of an enemy? Second practice is the practice of Sabbath. Okay? When God establishes people, he said, okay, I'm going to help you by creating margin in your life. And so 1 out of every 7 days during the week, 1 day a week, you need a time to rest. The word Sabbath literally means to stop. And it's interesting because it's a verb, it's active, and what's the action? To stop, right? That's Sabbath. So Sabbath is a day to stop working, stop worrying, stop, let's add another W, wanting, desiring, got to have more, whatever. Sabbath is not a day to go shopping, okay? Sabbath is a day to just stop. Stop working, stop working. Now, there's things you're going to do during the day, but you're going to declutter your day. 1 day a week, like Chick-fil-A figured this out, right? Do you know how many times I've driven to Chick-fil-A here on Sunday after church? Because it is the perfect day to grab some Chick-fil-A. That rhymed. I didn't mean it to, but, you know, sometimes I flow like a rapper. What am I going to say? Anyway, so, no, but like after church, we go to Chick-fil-A. Oh, it's closed, right? And it used to be, and I shared this in 2 weeks ago, it used to be not just like the Bible Belt of America, the Bay Area. 1 generation ago, almost everything was shut down on Sundays. And people developed things like family times and Sunday drives, and they'd spend time together and whatever. And that doesn't happen anymore. But imagine if it did. Wouldn't it be refreshing just to our culture? Even if people aren't Christians or didn't believe in God even or whatever. But wouldn't it be a good thing if businesses had signs open 24/6? You know? there's a day we just stop. In fact, it's so important. Have you thought about this? The Sabbath is part of the 10, what? Commandments. Exodus 20, let's take a look. Remember to observe. Like, you got to do this. This is a command from God. It's a good command. Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work. Got to get all your stuff. But the seventh day is a Sabbath day of rest. And here's the important part. Dedicated to the Lord your God. So it doesn't mean you can't rake leaves on the Sabbath. But when you do it, maybe you're communing with the Lord. Does that make sense? It's like you take a walk, take your dog for a walk or whatever. But when you do it, be intentional about spending time with the Lord. Now, it's fascinating to me that when God created the earth, the universe, but the earth, he built in a rhythm. He built a tempo into it. There are things that are designed into the fabric of the way things ought to be. It just works that way. Does that make sense? You might not like it. You might resist it. It just is. So here's an example. In Leviticus, I think it's 25, God tells his people, look, you farmers, right, which most of them were, 6 seasons you can plant and harvest. But on that 7th year, you cannot plant and you cannot harvest a field. Now, you can do it in another field on that 7th year, but not that one. That land, the land, listen, needs to rest. If dirt needs to rest, so do you and I. And actually, this is a farming principle today. That you cannot constantly be using and abusing. You can overuse it to your detriment. France actually at one point tried moving to a 10-day work week where they would work 10 days because they wanted to increase productivity. Work 10 days straight before you had some time off. And you know what happened? It decreased productivity. It increased anxiety. The economy crashed and suicide rates soared. It's very fascinating. Seventh-day Adventists, for instance, who are big on keeping the Sabbath, right? One doctor did a study, and his findings were that practicing Seventh-day Adventists, they live as much as 10 years longer than the average American. 10 years longer. Just by taking a day to rest. This is, when we say it's a life-giving principle, I mean even physically. You can say, oh, I don't like that, that's dumb, that's whatever. It just is the way it is. And research shows that your productivity goes down, especially after about working 50 hours a week. Anything after that, productivity usually goes down. Now, there might be a week or two you're extra busy and whatever, but over time, it goes down. You know why? What happens when you're overworked? You get tired. And when you're tired, you make better decisions in general or worse decisions? Worse. Do you make more mistakes or less mistakes? Yeah, and then now you got to spend your time fixing all these things. And it's like, why did I do that? And I shouldn't have done that. And why did I hire them? Now I got to whatever. And it's all this stuff because you're going too fast. Speed isn't everything. And in fact, I love this quote by H.H. Farmer, which great last name, Farmer. Says this, if you go against the grain of the universe, you get splinters. So you can say, oh, the Sabbath, that's, Old Testament law, whatever, that doesn't apply. I'm telling you, God gives us commands for our good. There's a reason, always a reason, even if we don't like it, even if we don't understand it, to rest is good. And it says, but did you catch the part that says, by keeping it holy? In other religions, if you want to meet with God, you go to a place. But in our faith, if you want to meet with God, you set aside time. It's less about a place, and it's more about space in terms of time allotted to slow down and enjoy God's presence. And by the way, make it enjoyable. Make your Sabbath time enjoyable. And maybe you're like, I can't do a full day. Okay, could you do 3 hours? What if you just started somewhere? Again, not expecting you to do 1,575 push-ups in an hour. But I bet you you could work up to 10. You could work up to 20 or whatever, metaphorically. And so just practice that. So in the Ten Commandments, the only commandment that is given a reason why, an explanation, is this commandment. And what the Lord does is he goes back to the Genesis account of creation. Look at verse 11. He says, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them. But on the seventh day, what does it say? He rested. Who's the he? Okay, he stopped. By the way, Sabbath means, or Shabbat, it means two things. It means to stop and it means to delight or to enjoy. And I love those two definitions because that's what we ought to do. But even God rested. That's why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, set it apart as holy. This is what he did. And in creating creation in his image and even us, it's woven into the fabric of reality, right? And so if you're like the kind of person, I'm a type A kind of person, Joel, you don't understand, I'm a driver, I like to get things done. God rested. Do you understand? But I'm kind of a big deal, I got a lot of responsibilities. God, the one who holds atoms together, rested, okay? But I've got, all these kinds of things. I'm trying to get ahead. God rested. If God stopped and enjoyed, which he does in the Genesis account, he looked at everything he made and he said something. He said, it's very good. He delighted in his creation, and we ought to delight in him and in what he's created. See, God knows more than we know, and so out of his love, he restricts, he prohibits, he limits us. And isn't that what Jesus says in Mark 2? It says this, the Sabbath was made for man and woman, for people, not people for the Sabbath. It's not like, oh, you got to do this because, no, it's a gift. It's a gift, don't you see? It's a gift from God given to us because he loves us, right? Okay, let's go to the last one here, is the practice of, so we've talked about solitude, silence, and then the Sabbath, and then this last one is simplicity. I won't spend much time here, but because we've talked about this, but Jesus says this in Matthew 6 during the Sermon on the Mount. He says, therefore I tell you, don't worry about your life, what you'll eat or drink, or about your body, like those dudes prancing, as they run or whatever, what you will wear. Okay, these are the things we worry about, by the way. But is not life, like true life, more? Isn't it more than food and the body more than clothes? Right? See, 90% of Americans a little over a century ago were farmers. And today about 2% of Americans are in agriculture in some way, in farming and whatever. But the point is that it was hard work as a farmer back then, but it was also a lot simpler in terms of you knew what you were supposed to do and you did it well, right? Then we have industrialization, then we have urbanization, then we have now consumerism. And we are fed this lie by advertisers. This is what they're trying to do. They're trying to sell us, literally. They're trying to sell us something. It's propaganda in a sense, and I get it. We got to spend. It's good for the economy, all that good stuff. I'm just telling you, it wouldn't hurt some of us to just live a little bit more of a simple life. Do we actually need that? By the way, when Jesus said that, he said that 2,000 years ago. Think about that. He's like, what are you worried about? What you eat and drink and what you wear and all these kinds of things, right? And there's probably some guy listening to him go like, man, I just bought my third tunic. I just need two. I need one to wear, one to wash and whatever. And I got the third because I'm so greedy. And he felt guilt and shame, Meanwhile, we open up our closets, all the stuff pours out. Did you know that what do they call the storage units? Those extra storage units where we put all of our stuff that doesn't fit in our house, or our second house, we call it a garage. And then our third house is a storage unit. It's a $50 billion industry every single year, right? And the truth is, I'm not anti-storage units, or anything like that. I'm just saying the truth is most people don't even know what's in there, really. They almost never do it. Friends, your life is shorter than you think. Give stuff away. If it's broken and busted, throw it away. We can live a more minimalistic life. The world pitches us this constantly. More is happier. No. Scripture says more of God, to know him, to be with him is more joy, which is what Jesus says this. In Luke 12, he says, watch out, like careful here. And I love that he said this 2,000 years ago. He's talking to people who have, compared to us, very little. Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Here's why. Real life doesn't consist in an abundance of possessions. And that's a good word for us, abundance. We live in a culture that is abundant, and we think we always need more. What if we didn't? Wouldn't that be freeing, actually? What if we actually were convinced that we have enough? It's not to say we can't get a new pair of shoes. It's not to say we can't whatever, but we just dialed it back some because we didn't believe the lie that life consists in the abundance of our possessions. Instead, we actually believe Jesus. He says, be careful of that. Be careful of that, okay? So last verse I want to share with you, then an illustration, then we'll wrap up. 2 Corinthians 3:18 says this, and we all who with unveiled faces, okay? So the Lord used to be, quote, hidden from us because of the corruption of our hearts and minds, but now we can see, now we can understand. He's given us the gift of knowing him, right? So, and we all who with unveiled faces, we can see him. What do? We contemplate, or it means behold. We contemplate the Lord's glory, the manifestation of his being and his greatness and his wonder and his beauty, are being transformed. We become more like him into his image with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. So I like that word, though, contemplate the Lord's glory. Here's the illustration. Imagine contemplating a great work of art. I'll draw your attention to Van Gogh's Starry Night. You ever seen that? It's the one with like the blue swirls and squiggles and all that. It's got some stars and a moon and whatever, and it just all looks funky and whatever. Okay. You look at Starry Night, and when you first look at it, that's all it looks like. Squiggles and swirls, blue and yellow. But then you look at it, and you look at it, and you look at it some more, and you look at it even more, and then eventually the work of art begins to mean something to you. Something happens. It required some time. It required some contemplation. Friends, so it is with Christ. You see, you can experience your Christian life this way. Okay, so Jesus is the eternal God, but the Son of God, second person of the Trinity. He was born in Bethlehem, Mary, Joseph, got it. And then, maybe there's a donkey involved, whatever, wise men and their shepherds. Okay, so he was born Christmas, got it. Okay, he lived the perfect life we could not live and healed people and cared for people and taught these amazing things. And those things still apply today, by the way. But then he gave his life, like he was, unfairly, unjustly arrested, and his friends abandoned him, denied him, And ultimately, he laid down his life. He was crucified. He was on the cross. He's like, he died for our sins. And then 3 days later, he rose again. Okay, I got Jesus. I got Jesus down. And here's what I would say. No, you just have the squigglies and the swirls. Everything you said is true. All those things are true. But you haven't beheld, you see. You haven't contemplated. The scriptures lead us. But God also gave us an imagination, for instance, and sometimes our imagination, if being led by the scriptures, the truth of God's word, they can move us. So, imagine Christ on the cross. Imagine him being spit upon and people laughing at him and mocking him. Imagine this whole scene. He's suffering, he's agonizing, the crown of thorns shoved on his head, he's dripping blood. He's crying out to his Father. Now imagine this. Imagine he makes eye contact with you. He's not just up there, he looks at you. And at first, you might feel so dirty because you're like, it's my sin that put him there. And Jesus, as he's going through this, he must be disgusted with me. Okay? That thought, friends, is the squiggles and the swirls. You've got to behold, you've got to contemplate. Because if you contemplate, then you'll begin to understand, wait a second. He wasn't forced up upon the cross. Jesus says, no one takes my life from me. I lay it down of my own volition. In other words, Jesus, as he looks at me, he says, I died for you. I know that you are worth this suffering that I'm going through. He's actually a God of compassion. He's thinking of others on the cross. His mother, he looks at John and says, John, when I'm gone, will you take care of mom for me? You remember this scene? He looks at those who are just brutally beating him, just merciless, whatever, mocking him, spitting. He says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, right? And so now when you imagine Jesus looking at you, you actually see his eyes filled with love, filled with mercy, filled with grace. After all, he chose to be there. Why? Because he found you to be worth it. Found you to be worth it. Now all of a sudden your heart melts. And this is how, friends, we are changed from the inside out. At first, it's just squiggles and swirls and kind of like doesn't look like much and next painting, as it were. But if we behold, if we contemplate, you know what you need for contemplation? You need time. You need space. You need silence. You need rest. You need to turn this off. You need to get away from it. You need to just find some space. And now, Carmen and the team are coming out. They're going to close with a song. Here's how we're going to do this. Appropriate to this message, all I'm encouraging us to do is to listen. Okay? That's not going to be hard, right? Just listen. The words will be on the screen. You can close your eyes if you want. Just listen. Spend time with the Lord even during this song. And then Carmen will dismiss you.